When Nintendo released the Game Boy Player for the GameCube in 2003, there was a slight problem. The GameCube controller didn't and still doesn't make for a good controller for Game Boy games. The D-pad underneath the analog stick is just too small, and the stick wasn't meant for Game Boy games. But there were worthy alternatives. One could use a Game Boy Advance with a GBA to GameCube adapter, or better yet, the HORI Digital Controller, or Game Boy Player controller. It comes with a more comfortable D-pad, though it did lack analog sticks. This controller is highly sought after, going for a pretty penny on eBay these days. But over the years, alternatives have come about. In my opinion, the best among them was the Retrobit Legacy GC controller. I pre-ordered this controller back in January on Castlemania Games, and just last month, it finally arrived. Today on Gaming Delight, we'll be taking a look at this controller and what it's capable of. I love Retrobit. They always make the best third-party accessories, as well as officially licensed reproduction cartridges. About 3 years ago, I did an unboxing and review of the Sega Genesis wireless arcade pad, and it worked beautifully. Throughout all this time, I've obtained more Retrobit products, including the Big 6, which works wonders for Nintendo Switch Online's Genesis library. And now, here it is, the Legacy GC controller for the GameCube, priced at a mere $20. Finally, a cheap and comfortable way to play Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games on the Game Boy Player. Not to mention high quality. The D-pad on the old school controller isn't very aesthetically pleasing out of the box. Don't believe me? Ask Mad Little Pixel.
I feel like, I wish the D-pad was had a little texture to it.
Now for this video, I'll be showing you what the Legacy GC controller can do, and see if it's actually worth the asking price. Disclaimer, I wasn't paid by Retrobit to write this review. In fact, all of my Retrobit products were purchased out of my own wallet. With that in mind, let's check it out. Right out of the box, you can see that it looks almost the same as the HORI Digital Controller, but there are a few differences. For instance, the Legacy GC's start and select buttons are horizontal rather than diagonal, and there's dual Z buttons instead of just the one. There's also 2 tiny buttons, T for turbo functionality and C to turn it off. Size-wise, it definitely matches that of the Super Nintendo/Super Famicom controller. The cord is also ridiculously long. Plus on the back, you'll see macros instructions. Pressing and holding start and up puts the D-pad in its standard mode, start and left puts it in left stick mode, and start and right, C stick. Now let's see this thing in action. For starters, we'll test it out on a few Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games on the Game Boy Player. Super Mario Advance? Nothing to it. The D-pad on this controller is definitely more comfortable than the one on the GameCube controller. Mario Kart Super Circuit? Well, I'm more partial to Mario Kart 8, but this game works well with the Legacy GC, even though I did have a hard time taking first. Playing Super Mario World Super Mario Advance 2 with this controller is a breeze. Now for the classic NES series edition of Super Mario Bros. Needless to say, it plays beautifully with this controller. All in all, I feel like I'm playing NES and Super Nintendo games with this thing. Now let's look at some original Game Boy games, starting with the classic, Super Mario Land. Yep, playing with the Legacy GC feels better than even the original Game Boy. No offense though. Now for a non-Mario game, if you can call it that. Alleyway, an early Game Boy title played just like Atari's Breakout, easily playable. The regular GameCube controller's D-pad doesn't do the paddle justice. The Legacy GC, however, is the exact opposite. So we got Game Boy games out of the way, but let's see how it works with a GameCube game. Let's try Super Smash Bros. Melee. I have the Japanese version, since a Western copy goes for more. There's no C-stick on the Legacy GC, but that's not an issue for this game. Once you have it in left stick mode, it's smooth sailing. I had no trouble playing as Captain Falcon with this controller. Well, almost no trouble. What about Wii games? Well, it's definitely not for games that require motion controls, but let's try Super Smash Bros. Brawl, which doesn't. Yep, it works. The only problem is the D-pad is no substitute for the analog stick. Nevertheless, Smash is playable with the Legacy GC. Now onto Virtual Console games. Super Mario World was a bit of a struggle. I had to hold X to dash and press B to jump. But then again, that's because of the button layout on the Legacy GC and a regular GameCube controller. For SNES Mario games on the Wii Virtual Console, this controller is not recommended. But NES games like Punch-Out and Mega Man 2 are a breeze. So that takes care of what the Legacy GC was made for. But just for funsies, let's see how well it works on the Steam Deck and the Nintendo Switch. For these tests, I'm using the 8BitDo G-Bros wireless adapter, since it's the only one I've got for GameCube controllers. Works fine on the Steam Deck, but what about its games? Let's try Atari Vault. Not bad with Pong. And Asteroids was the same way. The controller also works fine on the Switch. First up, Capcom Fighting Collection's Pocket Fighter. Plays perfectly with the Legacy GC. Then again, it's no different than using a Pro controller. But New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe is a different story. Out of the box, to dash would require using one of the Z buttons, which is very awkward. The button settings in the game don't help. Now for the Game Boy Advance library of Nintendo Switch Online. Same situation as Mario U Deluxe, Z button to dash. I'm used to holding both the jump and dash buttons with a single finger in a Mario game. Plus, I can't access the power-ups I accumulated. What's more, you can't rewind. You could do some button mapping, but to me, it's not worth it. Oh well. So overall, the Legacy GC controller is perfect for Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, and GameCube games, as well as certain Wii games, maybe some PC and Switch games here and there with the right adapter. Your mileage may vary. If you want one for yourself, It's available on Amazon and Castlemania Games for $20. It comes in 2 different colors, black and indigo. I'll leave links in the description below. But don't you think RetroTINK could also make a wireless version of this? Or maybe a USB version for modern consoles? Well, we'll see. Thanks again for watching Gaming Delight. Until next time, happy gaming!